checkerboard. And you want to cut, you would want to cut each segment now the same width as the original strips that you had, 1.5, so that when you sew this together, you end up with 1-inch squares. So there you have a checkerboard effect. Then from there, this is just very elementary, and this is the beginning of all kinds of things that you can do. See, that can be a wonderful corner piece. I'm doing a little applique here, and I want to start out by telling you that once again I starch my fabrics before I do the applique, and that helps keep the stabilization of the backing fabric as well as the applied fabric. Now, you can fuse your design on there with any of your favorite fusible web. The other thing that I think is very important is to always stabilize your backing fabric when you are appliquing to it. You are essentially doing embroidery on top of this fabric, and all machines call for a stabilization. You're going to have much nicer results if you do that. Now, I have this dark blue fabric, and the thread that I'm using is just a little bit lighter. I like that because I want the stitches to show, not necessarily too much, not huge, because they're very tiny stitches. The camera work here is so great. You're getting a very, very close picture of what I'm doing here. And you can see that the stitches are just a little bit lighter than the fabric. Now I'm using cotton thread. I like to piece with cotton, and I like to applique with cotton if my fabrics are cotton. It all has a nice give and a warmth, and it all works together really well. Now, I'm using a very tiny buttonhole stitch here, and once again I still have the same foot, because what I can see is my center needle position, and that is the, well actually it's a little to the right. It is where my edge of my applique is, and I can see that very easily, so that I can really follow the edge of the applique so I can stitch on the applique. Okay, now I want to show you something. On my machine here, this is a Sapphire by Husqvarna Viking, and it has this sensor system. And one of the qualities of this system is that when my needle goes down, the presser foot goes up just a little bit so I can pivot. And that's really nice for applique. It's almost a hands-free situation because you don't have to lift up your presser foot. Some machines have a knee lift, which does the same kind of thing. But this is automatic, so it's kind of a luxury. Now you can see, can't you just see, because this camera work is so wonderful, how close I can get to the edge, and I can have this just really nice flowing edge. Now the thing is, if I'm going to sew really fast, once again I'm going to talk to you about your speed. When I come to little very tight corners like this, I can take it one stitch at a time, and I'm doing that by lifting my foot off of the pedal, off the gas, and I'm going slow. And in fact, on a lot of machines you can even go like stitch, 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 like that if you are in a particular situation. But once again, I just have to say, this goes much more quickly than when I used to do this by hand. Years ago, I did everything by hand, and what I like to do with the sewing machines now is try to approximate what I did by hand. Another thing about applique is when you're appliquing something on, your thread has to travel longer, so you want to lower your thread tension some so that your thread will lay on top of the applique instead of embed in it. Now that's good if you're trying to do a blind applique idea, but when you want to have stitches laying on top because it's part of the design then you want to lower your thread tensions a little bit. I always make samples of test samples before I make a project. And what this is leftovers from my test samples. I stitched strips together, and I was testing the different threads that I wanted to use for quilting. And I used some variegated things and some cotton things, and then I ended up using the, like I said, the smoky clear polyester. And so I end up with something like this background piece right here. And so it's just sitting there, and so along comes this bird that I'd thread painted, and he just plops himself right on there. And then I used one of my favorite stitches, which looks like railroad tracks. So the bird was left over from a demonstration of thread painting. And so I find sometimes that my test pieces and my demo pieces can come together, and I can have a whole new project. Here is another applique design from my Arts and Crafts design group called Rose Tile. And I had quilted this with the grid before I worked on the Button Flower Quilt. And the variegated green thread makes a very interesting grid pattern. Here you can see that the grid was quilted right over the flower applique. To order patterns or class videos, come to my website, www.threadpaint.com. Thank you for joining me on Designing by Thread. This is Terry White. See you next time.